to rock this place.
Welcome to Buffalo Sports Conversation Room. I'm your host, Jamie Malloy, and today we are welcoming back my wonderful co-host. He's the the Buffalo to my Bill, the New York to my Mets, and also the New York to anything New York State or New York City sports. So please, everybody, let's welcome back the wonderful, the talented, the one and only Mr. Joe Dalio. Hi, Joe.
Thank you.
How's it going?
It is great. I very much appreciate the excellent introduction there. It's going great. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad. I thought I'd start out this episode with a bang, so as a preview for next week too. But we'll get into that next week. We'll talk about that later. So, anyway, since we didn't get a chance to talk about the Pittsburgh preseason game the week prior to the Bears game, let's talk about that game. So what do you think, how do you think they did in the Bears game to show improvement from the game against Pittsburgh, which the starters didn't look as well?
Yeah, they were determined to show improvement. Now, I didn't get to see a lot of the game because I was traveling. But I read up on it, and obviously we all know what happened in the Pittsburgh game. There was a lot of penalties. There was a lot of negative things that people were worried about. And, McDermott all week preached about that. And, from what I heard, he even had them running laps in practice, doing things the old fashioned way. If somebody committed a penalty or did something wrong in practice, it was just kind of like, old time Little League football, run a lap. So I thought that was a great idea, if that really happened. So they were determined to fix those mistakes, to, correct a lot of the things they were doing wrong and just make sure they ended the preseason on a good note. And, from what I read about and saw, that certainly happened from the starters, even to those fighting for jobs. So definitely a great improvement over the second preseason game.
Yeah, and one player who I think did improve a lot was Kyle Allen. After that game where he struggled against the Colts as the starters, he really put the work in and took everything in that Dorsey said pretty well. So, yeah, I do agree with that. Anyway, there are let's move on to the coaches in the 2023 season. Now, there are some who should stay and some who should go. Some have been able to make it in the regular season, but have failed to make it in the big game, which is the Super Bowl. So my question to you is, which group of these coaches do you think should be fired or retained, and why? And I'm going to read you the names. So let's start off with Washington Commanders coach and former former boss of our head coach Sean McDermott, named Ron Rivera. He's got an interesting situation this year with a team with a young quarterback and a lot of returning starting good caliber talent around him from veterans and young players. So what do you think if they don't do well this year? Do you think he's going to get fired, or do you think they might give him another year because this year he's developing a rookie quarterback unlike past years?
If I'm making this decision, I say to keep Rivera unless things go way off, unless he completely loses the locker room. People are expecting Washington to struggle. Like you said, they have a young team developing a young quarterback, and I think that needs time. And I think, we've seen Rivera develop young teams before, in Carolina, bringing them to a Super Bowl eventually. So I think you need a little patience with this team. And again, unless he completely loses the locker room, which I don't think will happen, I definitely think you keep him around a little bit longer. I mean, I for this team, I just don't see, many different or better coaches you can get. So he's definitely a keeper in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Joe. We've seen Ron Rivera do it in Carolina, and he also did that with Sean McDermott as defensive coordinator, and the same thing in Buffalo, except it's pretty much Super Bowl or bust for the Bills. Where in Washington, it's just rebuilding with a young team, kind of like the situation he had in Carolina. So yeah, I agree. Keep Ron Rivera. We both agree on that one.
Okay.
Now, let's move on to Dennis Allen of the New Orleans Saints. Now, he's a guy I think who has the most, other than Brandon Staley, he has the most pressure to win now because he's got Derek Carr at quarterback and a lot of key position battles there at wide receiver and a lot of good receivers and running backs around him. But Alvin Kamara is suspended again. So what do you think? If this is it Super Bowl or bust kind of for the Saints, you think, with Dennis Allen, or what do you think?
I don't think that team's at a Super Bowl or bust at this point. I picked, I think the Saints are going to win that division. It's a weak NFC South. I honestly think the Saints will win the division. But and so I think obviously that will help to keep Allen around. I'm probably going to repeat myself for a lot of these answers here. Unless things go totally wrong and things totally go south, no pun intended there. I just think he stays regardless. But I definitely think the Saints are going to win that division.
Yeah, I could see that, but I also see Carolina or Atlanta winning that division too. And like you said, it's very weak. So, but yeah, I think unless things really go unless they go 2-15, then yeah, I would keep Allen.
Mm-hmm.
And now everybody's favorite, sarcasm there, Mike McCarthy of the Dallas Cowboys. This is a interesting one because as you saw last in the offseason this past year, they finally were able to chew off Zeke's salary in his second year contract by releasing him and dumping that $100 million contract. But I think the pressure's still on Dak to be able to deliver the Cowboys and finally win their first Super Bowl in over 28 years. So what do you think with McCarthy? Do you think keep him or let him go if they don't win the Super Bowl?
That's a tough question. I think McCarthy, out of all the coaches in the NFL, even probably on the hottest seat, as far as for good teams anyway. And again, Dallas certainly has Super Bowl potential. It's a tough call. What happens if they don't win the Super Bowl? What happens if they have a great regular season and actually win a couple of playoff games and lose to a superior team? What do you do then? I get the feeling with this team, it is Super Bowl or bust. So anything short of making the Super Bowl, I think, for Dallas will result in McCarthy losing his job. Whether that's deserved or not, I don't know. That's a good question. But, certainly if this team goes out in the first round again or doesn't make the playoffs for some strange reason, there's no excuses now. Just picking up Trey Lance. If something happens to Dak Prescott, you got another decent quarterback behind him now. Cooper Rush even, in there too. So no excuses for this team at this point. I really believe that, again, another early playoff loss or anything that happens before that, I think McCarthy's gone. Then there'll be some questions if they go, deep into the playoffs or to the Super Bowl and come up short. That's going to be an interesting situation, and we'll see.
Yeah, I mean that's a very wild card situation in Dallas, and the coach is obviously the hero when he wins and the scapegoat when he loses, much like our quarterbacks, as we all know. But also, Jerry Jones is also known for keeping a lot of coaches and having them overstay their welcome if he really likes them. You saw that with Jason Garrett. He was there for 10 years of basically mediocrity and nothing, but that's not going to get it done. You want to, they thought by going to a big guy like McCarthy, he was going to finally help them win a Super Bowl. So yeah, it's a wild situation. Or I think it's going to go either way. I think it's going to depend on what Jerry Jones wants to do at the end of the year, because he's got the talent now. He doesn't have the $100 million running back in Zeke. He's got this quarterback that has a lot of pressure, and he's got Trey Lance. So I think Jerry Jones is going to end up making that decision regardless of what happens, unless they go way, way off the rails. It's going to be up to Jones, and it's going to be his call. So
I agree.
Mm-hmm. And what about our friend Mr. Todd Bowles from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Now he's in a interesting situation because this is the first year of the post-Brady era. He's got Baker Mayfield, hopefully as a starting quarterback for the whole season. If not, he's got Kyle Trask, who looked good in the preseason when his name was called, but so did Baker. So my question is if they have a really good defense, but they only put up like 4 or 5 wins in that division because they're a young team, should Bowles stay or should he go?
Yeah, listen, I'm not an NFL coach, so I don't like to be critical of them. But I'm not sold on Todd Bowles. Just he's a great defensive coordinator, and he's proven that on several occasions. But just even coaching the Jets before this, the Jets always came up short. Granted, with not a lot of talent there. This situation, I feel like he's coming up short. Granted, no Tom Brady anymore, and that Super Bowl team is gone, obviously. But it just seems like every Todd Bowles coach team seems to come up short and underperform. And I think if that happens again, again, like you said, in a weak division here. Now, again, I know that the talent level is maybe not as strong. But again, Baker Mayfield, he's no slouch. I mean, he could still play the position, and they have an opportunity again in this weak division to do well and even win it. At an under 500 record probably. But again, this team or any Todd Bowles team, Todd Bowles coach team seems to underperform in my opinion. So I'm saying if they underperform again, then he's gone.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. If they underperform, he's most likely going to get fired because he's had his chances with Brady and things didn't go very well. Last year was a quick exit. That was probably more a referendum on Brady than Bowles. But, hey, I think he has to get it done this year with a young team, or they're going to probably have to go to another younger, new-minded coach to help guide this team to where they want to go. And they have a lot of potential, but if they don't play to their potential, I think Bowles is on the hottest seat of all these coaches really that are from rebuilding teams. So yeah, we both agree Bowles should get fired if they underperform.
Definitely. I'd love to have him as my defensive coordinator, but not as my head coach.
I agree with that too. He's very good at calling defensive plays.
Mm-hmm.
So lastly, Joe, what do you think about Brandon Staley from the LA Chargers? He's taken a lot of heat from the 27-0 collapse of the Chargers playoff loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. And he's probably on the hottest seat of all for a winning team because he has a loaded team and has the pressure to win now, or he might get fired, as the NFL is a win now business. So what do you think about Staley's seat?
I think that's a very similar to the McCarthy situation. I predicted the Chargers. I said they're one of those teams that can get hot late, win a few games on the road, and potentially go to the Super Bowl. I honestly think it's the same thing as McCarthy. If this team fails to make the playoffs, or again underperforms in the playoffs and doesn't even come close, and gets another early exit, I don't think he stays. But again, I don't think they have as high Super Bowl expectations as the Cowboys. And again, if they make a deep run into the playoffs, I think there's a good chance he stays. And I think that potential is definitely there. But again, early exit or no playoffs. And I think we've seen the last of him with the Chargers.
Yeah, I agree with that. Staley's one of those guys. He's got a really good offensive mind, and he's another guy who's a great young coordinator, but his team seem to always come up short as a head coach. So yeah, if they get bounced early again, I think he gets bounced as well. But if they become the Chargers team that makes a late run deep into the playoffs as an underdog team, then yeah, I think he stays. But I think that one's 50-50.
I agree.
Okay, so are there any other coaches that you could think of, Joe, or do you want to move on?
Uh no, I mean it's every year, teams underperform or there's losing teams, and there's a string of coaches at the end of the year that we know are going to be let go. But I think it's now just let's play the games and then see how it plays out. And we'll probably be having this discussion again towards the end of the season on who may be on their way out.
Indeed, we will. Okay, everyone. It's now time for our question of the day. So, Joe, are you ready for your question? Are you ready to rebound and hopefully start a new streak?
Yeah, I need to rebound. I'm ready.
Okay, so here's your question, Joe. Your question is, can you guess who this NFL kicker is? Sorry, folks, I had a pause there, but I'm still here. Anyway, this kicker made 300 field goals, won Super Bowl, and won one MVP. Is it Gary Anderson, Mark Mosley, Anna Vinatieri, or Justin Tucker? Again, guess this NFL kicker who made 300 field goals in his career, went to one Super Bowl, and won the most valuable player once. Is it Gary Anderson, Mark Mosley, Anna Vinatieri, or Justin Tucker? Your time to shine, Joe.
All right, what's the next question? No, just kidding.
You got me there. Good one.
Um, I don't think it's Vinatieri, only because I think he won multiple Super Bowls. So I'm going to eliminate him. Oh my goodness, I'm thinking this with the MVP. Who was the first one you mentioned?
It's a Gary Anderson.
I don't think Anderson went to a Super Bowl. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think he went to one. Mosley was in one. Tucker certainly. I think he was in one. I'm going to go with my first instinct here, and I'm going to say, when you say one Super Bowl, you're saying they won one Super Bowl?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to go with Mosley.
You are correct, Joe. You redeemed yourself. The correct answer was Mark Mosley, indeed.
Excellent. Process of
Awesome.
elimination on that one.
Good for you, buddy. So let's move on to players who changed teams for this season and how they could help their new team. Let's start with, of course, Aaron Rodgers moving from the Green Bay Packers to the New York Jets, Jets. A tribute to Fireman Ed there. We miss you, buddy. How do you think he will do for New York this year in the Jets and playing with Robert Saleh?
Yeah, I obviously this is the highest profile change of teams, and I think what this will also be the most impactful one in a positive way. I really think he takes the Jets to a higher level. Now, I'm not saying they're a Super Bowl team. I mean, they could be. I don't think they win the AFC East, but I think they battle the Bills all the way through. I said, when we did our predictions a couple of weeks ago, I said they would actually have the same record, except the Bills would win the tiebreakers. So I definitely see the Jets as being a playoff team and a potentially dangerous playoff team, obviously with Rodgers. Just bringing that winning mentality to a team that hasn't had a winning mentality in a long time. I think that's going to have the biggest impact there, just teaching this team how to win, teaching young players how to play in big situations and kind of guiding them, as they go along. So I think of all the changes we're going to talk about here, this one, again, highest profile, but definitely highest impact.
It definitely is the highest profile, but with high profile also comes with high pressure playing with those very fickle Jets fans over there. And granted, our Bills fans are fickle too, and we're passionate, fickle. They're passionate too, but sometimes Jets fans say things that are hysterically for memes and clicks and stuff.
Right.
So for comedy, it's just really funny to watch. But yeah, I do think Aaron Rodgers does help the Jets get back to winning. I don't think they're ready to win the division yet, as I think the Bills this year will win it for the fourth consecutive year in this regime and in this era of Bills football. But yeah, I think if the Jets do make the playoffs, they could be a sleeper team too with Rodgers.
Definitely.
And yeah, so now we're turning to three-time Pro Bowl running back Ezekiel Elliott. And obviously the beast himself was fed in Dallas. He was eaten in Dallas, but then he got that big contract and then things kind of fell off. Now he'll trying to be eating hopefully he'll be eating some chada in New England now with the Patriots on a 1-year deal. So what do you think of that move? Joe, now that he's on a 1-year deal, does he go back to Zeke and eat there in New England again? Or do you think he doesn't get his chowder there?
I don't think so. Only because remember we had the conversation a few weeks back about running backs and the short lifespan that they have, and looking for big contracts. He got his big contract, but he's one of the reasons now that these other running backs are not getting their big contracts, just because, again, as we discussed, the short lifespan of these players, the running backs, and how the dime a dozen aspect of the position at this point based on the current offensive state of the NFL. I think he'll help the Patriots. I think he'll be a good running back, kind of, but I don't think much better than Damian Harris, who New England lost to the Bills. So I think he'll be good. I think he'll help them, but I don't think he's ever going back to Zeke Elliott. I looked earlier. I think he's 28 at this point, which is like somebody else on the football field being 34 or 35. Again, that's just not the case with him. That's the case with all running backs. So I think he's past his prime. And I think, again, as much as he'll help the Patriots and he'll be a valuable player for them, he's not going to be the same player he was with the Cowboys a few years ago.
Yeah, and that's a shame because I'm as a Bills fan, I'm glad Zeke got picked up by another team and another team believed in his capabilities. And he basically was smart about it. He said, look, I'm going to go to another team. I don't need the large contract anymore. I got that with Dallas. I'm probably going to invest that after I play. So I'm just going to take the 1-year deal with the Patriots and be just a good running back and not the running back I was, just to help a team out and play because I love playing, not because I'm money hungry anymore. But yeah, good luck to you, Zeke, and the Patriots there, except when you play the Bills. I want to see you contribute for them in a good way. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then we're going to be moving on to, what do you think about left tackle Orlando Brown Jr., who signed a 4-year, $64 million deal with the Cincinnati Bengals after leaving and winning a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs?
I think on the defensive side, I think that's probably the biggest or the highest impact pickup there. I honestly think he's going to be a big help to the Cincinnati Bengals. I was just talking about Zeke Elliott kind of being past his prime. I think Orlando Brown is just getting into his prime. So, I think he's 27. But again, for, somebody at his position, that's just kind of reaching a peak. Again, 28-year-old running back is kind of reaching their end. But I think he's going to have a very positive impact for the Bengals and really help a defense that's already quite good.
Yeah, and the story on him's incredible. It actually goes back to when his father, Orlando Brown Sr., played for the expansion Cleveland Browns team. And in the preseason, he had a penalty flag that hit his eye by the that was hitting the eye in his eye by the ref. And unfortunately, it visually impaired him in that one eye, and he never got to play again. But it's good to see Junior. That hasn't happened to Junior, obviously, and he's in his prime, and he's keeping that eye safe. But then again, what happened with his old man? That was just a very fluke incident. You'll probably never see now because of player safety and everything. But yeah, like you said, a 27-year-old lineman is like a 27-year-old me doing this. I'm reaching the prime of doing this podcast. So yeah, I can relate to Orlando Brown there in terms of he's just getting started, and his time's going to come to be a star in this league. And he's already won one Super Bowl with the Chiefs and played with Patrick Mahomes. Now he's got a chance to go protect Burrow like he did with Mahomes and win one there. So, and he got a good payday. So yeah, it's a win-win-win situation for Brown all along.
It's funny you say that too, because I'm going to be honest with you. I did not make that connection. I did not know that he was the son of that individual with the penalty flag in the eye. So excellent point there. I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you want to see it sometime, go watch the video of like everything that's happened to Cleveland since the Browns returned, and that's like one of the first clips in the video. But you can do that in another day. Let's get back to the podcast.
All right, perfect.
So finally, let's take a look at quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo. After stints with the New England Patriots and leading the San Francisco 49ers to Super Bowl 54 when he was healthy, he is now basically going to be right now the starter for the Raiders. If he's able to stay healthy, he could probably be the starter for the whole year, but he's going there in like sort of a rebuild year, and hopefully he's like a bridge quarterback to Aiden O'Connell, because like we say in the NFL, especially nowadays with the way quarterbacks get hit with roughing the passer and everything, your quarterback's one hit away, and I think the Raiders are one Garoppolo hit away from potentially seeing Aiden O'Connell starting for the Raiders the rest of the year. And at that point, they'll probably only have like 2 or 3 wins, but they'll get a chance to develop O'Connell and see what his got. So what do you think about Garoppolo with in Oakland and reuniting with Josh McDaniels there?
Yeah, this one, as far as the pickups, I'm less optimistic about. Just not because of Garoppolo so much. I mean, I think he is a little bit past his prime. I've always been a big fan of his. I always want to see him do well. And I certainly wouldn't mind seeing him do well in this situation too. I just think, again, with this, I almost see it as a rebuilding situation with the Raiders. You know, he doesn't have a lot of talent around him. I think it's going to be a tough situation. And again, with the frailty, of his health and the questionable nature of that, how many games does he play? And then you get to a situation where if they really struggle with him as the quarterback and you have this quarterback waiting, do they lose patience and eventually, take him out and get this other guy in there to get some game experience? So, he might surprise us and the Raiders might do better than expected, but I'm not too optimistic about this one. And I think it's questionable the amount of time that Garoppolo actually plays.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. And like I said, they're one hit away from Aiden O'Connell playing, and potentially maybe they draft another quarterback next year if Aiden O'Connell doesn't work out. But Aiden O'Connell, I do think, has a bright future in this league, and it's good to see Garoppolo at least reunite with his former offensive coordinator in New England. So that's a positive there. And I like Jimmy G. And like he said in his interview with Aaron Andrews, it feels great. So now the Bills have posted their NFL cuts today, and they've cut guys like Dean Marlowe. And they also made a really smokescreen move by trading Boogie Basham to the Giants and trading Boogie Basham and a 7th round pick in 2025 to the Giants for a 6th round pick in 2025. And I've also cut Andy Isabella, which I was kind of upset about too, and among many others who are which players on this list do you think the Bills should have kept that are going to be missed moving forward, or at least be re-signed to the roster or to the practice squad?
Yeah, it's funny because I was looking through this and I was waiting for this day. I was looking forward to it, just very curious to see what was going to happen and what decisions the Bills were going to make. And after all that anticipation, looking at the final list and seeing what was happening, I wasn't really too surprised about any of these moves. And the Bills have been making such good decisions, personnel decisions over the last few years that I completely trust the decisions that they make. I was disappointed about a few of them. You mentioned Andy Isabella. I was hoping to see him, make the team just because he did well in the preseason and he really showed a lot of heart. And I thought maybe he would earn himself a spot on the roster. But, when you look at it, as much as, I'm sure we're not the only two fans that would have liked to see him stay on that roster. But, I think based on who they have and who they kept, I trust that decision. And I'm going to say it was a good decision, even though, again, it maybe not one that I wanted to see. Darrington Evans too was another one in that situation. I especially after the performance against the Bears, I did see that, live. I was watching the game at that point when he made his, 35-yard touchdown there and just ran through, several defenders and looked great. And, not only that, but I mean, I thought he made a case for himself also, in some of the other, games too and situations as well. Again, based on the running backs that they have, I think it maybe is a smarter decision to let him go than to keep him. I was reading too, somebody like Isabella may end up on the practice squad, and some of these other guys that were let go, um, also have a chance to end up there. There was a few that I was happy to see, get on the team. I had mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the show, Shorter, how, I like that type of receiver, it's just more of a slot receiver type thing. And I was hoping that he would make it, and he did. So I think that's a good move for the Bills too, not just because I wanted to see him make the team, but, to have some variety there. You got your guys like Diggs and Davis that can go long, and, you got somebody here kind of, Beasley like that can, get that 3rd and 10, that clutch, third down play to keep a drive going. So, I was very happy to see that. There's none of these moves, like I said, that surprised me or that I thought were wrong. As disappointing as it is to see Boogie Basham go, because he had an amazing preseason and he really proved himself and he had so much potential. But again, not maybe much room. And there's some guys that maybe they, you might argue they could have let go instead of a Boogie Basham. But I think that's a good move for the Bills. You're getting something for him. I mean, nothing earth shattering. But I think that's a great move for Boogie Basham because he's going to get a great opportunity with the Giants. And, besides the Bills, I love the Giants too. So I'm very happy to see him end up there. And I think he can have a very positive impact on that defense. Otherwise, looking at the list here real quick, I tried to do as much of this as I could by memory. But again, the Bills have been making positive, correct decisions for the last few years, and that's a credit to their management team. So I completely trust the moves that they make. And again, I don't outright disagree with any of them here, but even if I did, I think you have to trust what they're doing. And I think they got things right here.
Yeah, I do, and I want to bring up the Boogie Basham thing too. He's also the reason why he got traded, he'll get a great opportunity with the Giants is the former Bills connections there with Dable and Shane. So he'll be able to do well there. Plus, the Giants will get a 7th-round pick there, and we get a 6th-round pick. And it's like you said, it's not earth-shattering, but it's continuing to stockpile draft picks into the future besides 2024. And who knows? I wonder if we do something potentially with all these picks. They might have something up their sleeves that you, I, or other Bills Mafia members don't know. But yeah, really, these moves are about continuing to add to the $5 million we have in cap space and to get currency for next year in a Super Bowl or bust year. It's still moving the course forward, even in a year like this, to keep hopefully win another Super Bowl and win another Super Bowl. And then in 2026, the stadium will open and hopefully we'll be raising 3 straight banners in the 2026. But that's wishful thinking right now. And that's 3 years down the line. But yeah, the Bills really got a good head over their shoulders with Bean and McDermott, as they always have. And now it looks like they're really taking it up a notch. So you also have running back Ty Johnson and Jordan Mims, who were kind of like the surprises of the preseason, but they got released. And I was surprised because Ty Johnson brings another of that speed threat, kind of like how James Cook does, or he brings another like Darrington Evans in a Naheem Hines type of role where he could catch out of the backfield and maybe return kicks. So what do you think of those two being released? Because I was shocked with those.
Yeah, and again, I was maybe a little surprised, but there's just so much depth there at that position that I just think it was a numbers game. They certainly didn't hurt their case with their performance during the preseason, but I think it's just, again, a numbers game, a crowded backfield already, and they're just, the ones out. Again, nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, again, they proved themselves for sure, but I think there's just, too many guys in front of them.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I still think they'll be able to be deep at the running back position. Maybe they sign some new guys in their replacement that'll be able to help with the 4 or 5 running back rotation that the Bills could use this year, besides James Cook as your number 1 and Damian Harris as your number 2. So I'm glad Damian Harris made the team, which was good to see. That wasn't a surprise either. So yeah, what do you also think about Von Miller being placed on the PUP list and is not going to be eligible to return until week 5? And I think this isn't something we should be panicking about because, like, last year we definitely needed him more because of the defensive scheme last year, and we didn't have as much depth defensively. But this year we got a better defensive, more aggressive multi-front scheme that with a lot of deep guys on the defensive line that can hold the fort down until Miller returns. So I want to know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think 100% it's the right move. I was listening to a football show on XM radio earlier, and somebody brought up a point. It's like, when would you rather have Von Miller? Would you rather have him strong for games in December and January when you need him the most? Or would you rather have him in September? Now, if you're the Bills and if you're a Bills fan, obviously you would want him, both times. You would want him all season. But why rush and risk, making things more difficult later on, risk further injury or bringing back before he's ready? I think it's a totally smart move. It's 4 games, and, they said, with practice time, it might be more, but I would much rather them do this than to bring him back too early and have something negative happen from that. So smart move, in my opinion.
Exactly. With him, it's muscle memory. When he gets back and he's totally healthy, he's not going to miss a beat. So we don't have to worry about him. He's a veteran. He's a Super Bowl winner, and he's He's
Mhm.
got a great attitude and just a fantastic football player and human being. Right mindset, positive attitude, all that. So,
Yeah, and you
um,
mentioned also, Jamie, that they have plenty of depth and plenty of guys that could step up in the meantime. It's not like these guys have to play a half a season. It's 4 games, maybe 5 games. So you got plenty of guys that could step in and step up and make a difference while he's gone. So another reason that I think that was a very good move too.
yeah, and also, what do you think about David Quisenberry, the kind of the darling of late December football last year, starting an offensive line, and this year before the 2023 season, he gets cut. So, what do you think of him
Mhm.
going from like kind of famous to being off the team?
Yeah, that one surprised me a little bit. I didn't understand that one as much. So, I didn't really read much about it or read any explanations for it or rationale for it. Again, I trust the Bills management and they know what they're doing. But that one did surprise me a little bit. I guess I don't really disagree with it, but again, I was a little surprised there.
I'm 50-50. I agree and disagree.
Mhm.
We got a lot of offensive line depth, but it was a cool story that he ended up starting last year, and it's just very cool story with him, and he'll be missed. So
Yep.
unless we do bring him back to the team, on a 1-year deal again, or the practice squad, because we love those 1-year deals. So anyway, what
Yeah.
about our man Ike Bodiger? I mean, everybody likes Ike, right? And no, not Dwight D. Eisenhower. Ike, our offensive lineman.
Kind of the same as with Quisenberry. I was a little surprised. Again, I can't really say I disagree, but that one made me wonder a little bit too. But again, I think they kept the right people. It's funny how I think Osiris Torrance maybe had something to do with some of these, and they're ready. Josh Allen's been praising him a lot lately, and I wouldn't be surprised if Torrance starts, game one, at the right guard position. Excuse me. But I'm wondering how much of an influence that might have had on the entire line. But same thing. I trust the decision. Little surprised, but again, you can't keep everybody.
Yeah, I know, especially in a rookie salary cap / salary cap era where it's a hard salary cap. You can't go over the cap. It's not like how baseball used to be before teams started following the NFL model now. But we'll
Right.
get into that on a baseball podcast hopefully another day. So but yeah, I think Osiris Torres, without speculation though, is a huge influence on all that because he may be a rookie, but
Mhm.
what does he bring that the O-line didn't have last year already? He brings the natural size, the physical tools to play right guard, and just the tread like feet that he's able to just maul people out of the way. And we needed to get a bigger guy on the line. And the good news about him too is you could play him anywhere on the line. You could even play him at tackle too, because he's big
Right.
enough to be a tackle besides a guard. So
Yeah, I agree. So, he probably did have a decent influence on these decisions.
he's a big boy too. He's a big
I
guy.
I can't wait to see what he can do.
He could be kind of like the modern day version of the big hog mollies with the Washington Redskins of the 90s. He could maybe start that movement for the Bills of getting a line like that, with
Yeah,
him
there
and
you go.
Deion
I'd
Dawkins.
love
And
to see it.
and you already know how Deion Dawkins is going to play this year.
Yeah.
That's what Deion Dawkins says, by the way. That's his trademark. He says you already know if you watch the NBC games. So anyway, let's keep our momentum going. And now let's talk about who we think are going to be the new playoff teams in the NFL this year. Now, I did have some teams in my newspaper, but I decided to ask you because this is kind of a subjective question. So who do you think are going to be some of the new teams this year?
So you're talking teams that were not in the playoffs last year?
Yeah, that could get in this year. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think to start in the AFC East, I think the Jets are an easy prediction there. They almost made the playoffs last year, and I could definitely see them getting in there this year. I'd be more surprised if the Jets don't make the playoffs than if they do. Let's see. Now in the North, in the AFC North, I'm trying to go division by division here. I don't remember if the Steelers made the playoffs last year. I don't think they did.
They lost in a tiebreaker to Miami, who got the 7th seed.
Okay. And I'm trying to remember, did the Ravens make the playoffs last year?
They did not.
Okay. I would not be surprised if both of those teams make the playoffs this year. The Steelers, I could see them winning at least 10 games. Again, you talk about management to trust. That's an organization that's been the case for decades. And, they've made some positive moves this year and, a great young quarterback that has a lot of potential. So I expect the Steelers to be in the playoffs this year. I said a couple of weeks ago on our prediction show that the Baltimore Ravens would win that division. So, I'm still saying that. So I think the Ravens make the playoffs as well. If you go to the AFC South on that same show, a little out there prediction, and I must say I'm not as confident of this prediction as maybe some other ones. I picked the Tennessee Titans to win the AFC South. So there's a team I don't think they made the playoffs last year. 2 years ago, they were the number 1 seed in the AFC. And I don't think there's that much of a difference there, to be honest with you. I think that's a team that always shows up. It's not the strongest division. I mean, Jacksonville will be good again, but I'm not sold on them. So I picked, Tennessee to win that division. So that's another playoff team in there. And I don't expect any surprises in the AFC West. I expect the Chiefs and the Chargers to make the playoffs there. If you go to let's go to the NFC East. I don't expect surprises there. Dallas and Philadelphia were both in the playoffs last year, and I think they'll make it again. I hate to say it as someone who roots for the Giants. I think the Giants take a little step back and don't make the playoffs. I know they did last year. So I'm trying to think teams that didn't make the playoffs. If you go to the NFC North, here's a prediction that a lot of people aren't making, and I might look foolish by saying this. The Detroit Lions do not make the playoffs. People are picking them and to go far and as a potential Super Bowl team. I think Vegas had them as the 3rd or 4th most likely team in the NFC to go to the Super Bowl. And it's hard to disagree with Vegas, but I am in this case. I don't think the Lions even make the playoffs. In that division, the Packers did not make the playoffs last year, correct? Did they get knocked out the last week?
Yeah, the Lions were the ones that actually knocked them out of the playoffs. And the Lions would have actually gotten in had I think it was Minnesota lost. So
or Seattle won or something.
No, Seattle. It was Seattle. You're right. If Seattle lost, that Detroit win would have knocked out the Packers and got them into the playoffs at the same time.
Right. But the Seahawks got themselves in there. The Packers have a chance in that division. I'm not so sure they get in, but there's a possibility. The Saints, I don't think the Saints made the playoffs last year, did they?
They did not.
Okay. So I picked them to win the NFC South by default. So I think the Saints get in this year. That's another new playoff team as far as teams that didn't go last year. I'm not quite sold on the Falcons, but they might surprise people. And again, in a weak division like that, where it's a toss-up, I'm not picking the Falcons to go to the playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised if they went. Again, they have that young running back now that I can't think of his name.
Bijan Robinson.
Yes, I think he can really make a difference for that team and take them far. But it's the Falcons, so I don't have a lot of confidence in them. And then in the NFC West, I really don't see anything changing there. I'm not so sure the Seahawks make the playoffs this year. 49ers for sure, and that's a weak division. The rest of the division, yeah, does not make it. I'm going to say so. So I guess if we're talking the Saints, maybe the Packers, maybe the Falcons, but the Saints I'd say are the one I'm most sure about, as far as teams that didn't make it last year that I think will get in this year.
I'm going to have to respectfully disagree. I agree with most of those, but I'm going to have to actually disagree with you on the Lions. I think they do make it. I think everything is cracked up to be. I think they're ready to go into Kansas City and maybe not win that game, but at least show the national stage that, hey, this is 2023. We're rolling with the big boys now, and we're not nationally irrelevant anymore. So if those young running backs and receivers, if Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams is suspended for the first game of the year, but the first 6 games of the year for gambling. But when he comes back, look out for him too. This team's young, and they're gonna win a lot of games after that Kansas City game. But yeah, we can agree to disagree on the Lions respectfully.
Yeah, definitely, respectfully, and I would love to see it. If you should talk about gambling, it's like I'm tempted to put a bet on the under on the win total for the Lions because I don't have a lot of faith in them, but I won't do that because I want to see them. I would love to see them make the playoffs, and to make some noise and beat some of these bigger teams perhaps. I'm just not sold on them yet, even as much as I'd love to see it.
As with the entire NFL, football's better, I think, when you have the Bills and the Lions doing well.
I agree.
So, well, it looks like we are coming down to the end of our show. So, Joe, where can we find you in today's crazy world of social media?
All right. I am Joe Dell Sports on Twitter. And yes, I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. And so, follow me there. And, I post some Bills updates and, other sports as well, baseball, basketball, hockey, everything on there. So, but especially now, a lot of Bills stuff. So, yep, follow me there.
Yep. And as always, folks, you can follow yours truly on X or Twitter. I'm still going to say X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. You can find me there on Bills Chat 1 at Bills Mafia Chat, and also at Jamie Malloy, the unbiased journalist at DJ Dog Tags. And you can also find me on DefiantTakesFootball.com, where I write stories about the Bills, Syracuse football, and spring football. And I also write for FanBuzz.com about G5 college football. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening, guys. And remember, folks, they can still talk about the 4 Super Bowls. They could talk about wide right. They could talk about Thurman losing his helmet in the Super Bowl in both Minnesota and the Cowboys. They can talk about the home run throwback in Tennessee. But as Chris Berman always used to say, folks, nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. We'll see you next time, folks.
Good night.
To rock this place.
Lowest prices of the season, up to 65% off.